And that's where I stumbled upon polarity. Polarity is dominant man, radiant woman, which basically man is in his masculine, completely connected with his feelings and leading himself and his woman towards the achievement of his vision.
Maros, Cincura from The Dominant Man. Welcome to Maniphesto's podcast. Good to have you on board.
Thank you. Nice to meet you. I'm glad to be here.
Great. So yeah, I first saw you on social media. I think it's about 4 months ago, something like that, where I saw these posts coming about dominant men are XYZ and emasculated men are XYZ. Kind of a whole lot of posts with something that for a lot of people I think was quite provocative. And I saw these things keep on popping up, and a lot of them kind of really triggered some thoughts in me. So at one point, I responded to one of your posts, and we had a little bit of a disagreement discussion. And I actually really liked the way that you tackled that conversation, even though we didn't agree at all. So this is the conversation we agreed to have based on that. So welcome on board. Good to have you here.
Thank you, thank you. Like I said already to you, I wasn't really sure what to expect based on the only conversation we had was kind of fiery a little bit. But yeah, let's talk about anything that comes up. I'm looking
Great.
forward.
So maybe before we get started, Maros, can you tell a little bit about yourself, where you come from, and how you got into becoming a men's coach? I understand you're working with dating, relationships, and also to a certain extent business. I assume more entrepreneurial business consulting and coaching. What was your journey into here? If you give us like the 5 minute version or something like that.
Yeah. So when I look back, I can see myself gravitating to this kind of work, to psychology slash therapy slash coaching, like the work with the internal world. When I was making decision which university to go, I wanted to go to psychology. My parents had a different opinion about this, so I kind of submitted to what's probably the right thing, from the outside, not based on my own intuition and judgment. So I studied business. I was in business for several years, working in corporate finance and entrepreneurship basically for a fund, launching a company for them. And over time, my own stuff started to come up for myself. Like I wasn't able to handle my emotions. I'm from Slovakia, from Eastern Europe. We aren't particularly famous for being emotionally aware and emotionally open, and sharing our feelings, especially as men. So I had this. I signed up for therapy, which I considered back then as a giant failure. I had like massive fear and massive shame to overcome just from this. And over time, I was just getting, it was a one big rabbit hole, this whole internal world and the path of self-development and psychology. I ended up reading, like swallowing the book of Tony Robbins, Awaken the Giant Within. I
Mhm.
signed up for events. So I spent 10 days with him live on events in the United States.
Mhm.
And like what happened was that I started to have like 50% interest in the business world and 50% interest in the psychology and the internal world. And in the business world, I had to push myself. I had to, like make the effort to get things done, to get things going. I didn't see particularly a lot of meaning in the work I was doing, even though you can say that from the outside it was relatively prestigious. I was working in mergers and acquisitions. I was launching a company from scratch for a fund. And when I was working on the psychology slash internal world slash confidence, emotions, and achieving my goals, like what I really, really want, this was effortless. Like I had the trouble to put those books down before going to sleep. I had troubles to actually focus on work because I was just obsessed with all this stuff.
Mhm.
So after I was with Robbins, I was applying what he was teaching. I got a lot of results. I got a lot of improvement. And then, as it always goes, things got better, and then things got like worse, and things got better, and things got worse. I was facing depression, and I couldn't figure out analytically how I can get myself out of it. And this was a big turning point because I realized that if I want to work through this, I have to really dive in the emotional work and in the emotional stuff, which Tony Robbins doesn't go that much. Like he's not particularly focused on that. Like he's more about like outcome driven, like
Mhm.
getting things done and basically creating the life of your dreams. So I started to study more of the emotional awareness, emotional releasing things. I spent hundreds of hours sitting in my emotions, trying to just be okay with what I was feeling, getting in my body. And I moved forward significantly. And there came a point where I decided that I want to get out of business world and I want to move into the self-development world. So I started to work for a company of a friend who was teaching public speaking and self-development workshops in my country. And I was doing okay, I would say. And after 1 year, basically I mean, the nice way to say this is that we terminated the cooperation, but the reality, I would say that I was basically fired because it was one-sided. And it
Mhm.
was the 1st January 2020, I think. And I had the decision to make: either I'm going to find another job or I'm going to go full time into this.
Mhm.
So I said, you know what, I'm going to go full time into this because I know that this is something that I actually want to do. I've been obsessing with this. I could be not, I would do this even if I don't get paid for it.
Mhm.
So I just want to do it. And that's how I started to do it full time. And since then I'm in it. And basically, I was doing this emotional work and I started my work with men on this, like working with emotional tension. That's where I was taking the like a lot of the confidence work came from. Just being aware of what you feel in your body. Don't be reactive to those experiences, to those feelings. Stay connected to what your goal is and slowly relax in your body as you go through the experiences. So for instance, guys in dating, they would approach a girl and they would freak out because their nervous systems weren't ready to handle that. They would get reactive and either go away, don't say anything, or they would just say something weird, or they would just completely be reactive and not even approach not even approach the girl that they wanted to. The
Mhm.
same in the relationships and arguments. But and it was so I was working with this with the guys especially, and you can take these principles and apply them for everything. You can apply it in dating and in relationships, in business negotiations, in business leadership, and so on. And then when I had my own problem, that I was able to deal with my emotions, I was able to set my goals. I had my own system stabilized. I was in the relationships, and no matter how hard I tried, things just weren't working. Like no matter how hard I was applying everything that I've learned, no matter how hard I was releasing, sitting with my feelings, the relationship just wasn't going the direction that I wanted it to be, and that there wasn't the harmony. And that's where I stumbled upon polarity. And polarity is dominant man, radiant woman, which basically man is in his masculine, completely connected with his feelings, and leading himself and his woman towards the achievement of his vision. And part of this is being like part of dominance is penetration. Part of dominance is leadership, and it. So basically, this is where I am now. This is what I'm working with guys right now.
Mhm.
The important thing is I don't teach one unified approach, like one thing to everyone, one size fits all, because I believe everyone comes to me in a different stage, so they all need something else. So all my programs, all the work I do with guys is a mix of like a training and one-on-ones. On one-on-ones, we tackle the specific situation where the guy is in, and in
Mhm.
the trainings, I talk about the big principles.
Mhm.
This
Great.
is it in a nutshell.
Thank you, Maros. That's really interesting. And there's so many things that are interesting to dive into there. One of the first things you mentioned was that you when you first started going to therapy, I think you said it was a big failure. And I can tell you that I myself, at the age of, I think I was around 29 or so, went to therapy for the first time. Um, and spent a long time telling a therapist my entire life story. And then after like, 10 sessions or something like that, then had this therapist start like, getting really focusing a lot on my relationship with my dad. And then started like telling me about like how like couldn't I understand how my dad was like a bad and evil tyrant basically, and I should be angry with him. And that the therapist started like getting really angry and pissed off and like was like frustrated with me because I wasn't angry with my dad. And so it was like this really
Wow.
weird thing. But for me, that was just an illustration. And my point is, I think that the entire therapy industry has been incredibly feminized and has been built on this kind of like, seeing the patriarchy, which is really just means like dominant men would be in your language as the root of all evil. Um, and so is
Yeah.
that something similar that you had, or what is it? What's your approach to
What
looking at therapy in that way?
I see. I had a different experience.
Yeah.
I was laughing when you said this because I also came and I said my entire life story.
Yeah.
But the reason why I was feeling like a failure is because I think I was having this perception that I should be okay. Like I considered myself a normal person. And
Mhm.
my internal experiences were constantly telling me that I'm actually not normal because of what's happening with my body, because of what I'm feeling, because of the thoughts I'm having. So
Mhm.
I came to the therapy and I asked the guy, I told him my entire life story. I told him all the achievements I do, that I speak 5 languages, then salsa professionally, play guitar. Like I put it all out there and I said, do you think I'm normal? That was my outcome for the conversation. And he gave it a little thought and he said, well, we don't really have such diagnosis. I can't really tell you.
Okay.
and that kind of and that was really good because I was very like in this binary, like, is it good? Is it not good? Is it normal? Is it not normal? And he
Mhm.
kind of dissolved this.
Mhm.
But eventually I stopped going there because it was really, really slow. And I think this was just this was just a mismatch where he was really speaking very slowly. And it's like I have a very different personality, very different pace. And I
Mhm.
guess you can say like this is where I got attracted to Tony Robbins because he's more like that, like with this space. But
Mhm.
I do agree that when I see people getting stuck in therapy, it's because they get lost in their internal world, lost in the emotional aspect and the feeling and the
Mhm.
flowy aspect of it. There's no taking action, and since there's no taking action, there can't be any positive behavioral change.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's what I heard is that in the beginning you had a real focus on emotions and your internal kind of experiences. And then it was
Yeah.
actually this experience of polarity or the understanding of polarity between male and female that brought you out of that. Is that correct?
That was the third stage. I mean, initially I was not particular. I was actually initially not at all interested in the emotional world. That's why I
Yeah.
like left the therapy and got into Robbins.
Mhm.
I think he was very like masculine, goal oriented, and so.
Mhm.
But what happened is that I had this like I had an experience where I had like a shadow breakthrough, where I was suppressing my anger for a really long time, and there's just like you can't handle anger with intellect. And when it broke through, I was so angry that I wanted to punch in the table in my living room when I was living in Prague. And I punched a hole through the table and I had a bloody hand.
Mhm.
And I didn't have an intention. I have so much strength. And I
Mhm.
got shocked and I was like this is a problem. Like I don't know what just happened. I didn't understand it, but I hurt myself and I lost completely control.
Mhm.
And this is what got me into emotional work, that there might be something that's happening beyond what I'm able to understand intellectually that I actually need to look at because it's really scary. And at the same time, I think I have to go there, otherwise I might hurt myself or someone else.
Mhm.
And then I was in the emotional world, feeling my feelings, understanding my feelings.
Yeah.
And it came a point where I was like, actually, now it has diminishing returns. I need to get back to getting shit done and lead and
Yeah.
leading
But it
myself
sounds
to
like you're
my
also
to the
with an
vision.
understanding that you can't leave your emotions behind. So you're using them
Yeah,
more actively and you're trying to balance outside, inside, and orientating
yeah,
equally between those. Something like that. Yeah, which is
absolutely.
I'd say very similar. I spent 7 or 8 years like doing all kinds of like yoga and contact improvisation, dance, and all kinds of stuff,
Mm.
which was incredibly powerful and had a real like breakthrough experience. I went to a boys only school, was in a very kind of masculine environment
Mm.
in my childhood, and so getting in touch with these things was great. But what I also noticed is that like the depths of chaos was eternal. Like they just continued, right? Like the more and more I
Yeah.
dived in there and focused downwards, the more and more like there was just more and more chaos and actually my main thing you said something about being in a relationship where you're doing everything you could to try and do things right, and it just wasn't
Yeah.
working. And
Yeah.
I had this goal from throughout my entire life, as I wanted to create a lifetime, stable, strong, growing in intimacy relationship. And
Mm.
I was following all of the things that should be bringing me there, and it just wasn't working, and I couldn't understand
Yeah.
why. And I was noticing, like, as I was going through partner after partner after partner, I was getting more and more jaded as well. So it
Mm-hmm.
was getting harder to actually do it in some way. So I was becoming more, yeah. So yeah, that led me then to realize, okay, there's something missing here.
Yeah. I'm curious, how did you get into the like the soft world, let's put it this way, the emotional world of yoga and contact improv from the boys only school?
Well, yeah, I mean, I went through a corporate career as well, and worked for Microsoft and was traveling around and doing a whole lot of, becoming a suit really, I guess, and found very little fulfillment in it as I was kind of like realizing, like, okay, well, I'm earning more money than I need, and there's
Mm-hmm.
something missing inside my soul, inside of my heart. So for me, looking back, it's very clear that this was a spiritual journey that was happening. Actually,
I
I was
see.
kind of embarking on a spiritual search in some ways, and so it started with rock climbing. I went on a trip to India and landed in this town called Hampi, where there was a whole lot of rock climbing. And then I
Mhm.
kind of just by coincidence, I went there for 3 months, and I ended up spending the last like two months or 1.5 months in Hampi just rock climbing every single day, like bleeding from my fingers, and but had a great time there.
Yeah.
Um, and that was kind of like, yeah, very much nature, out in nature, and I started doing that a lot, and also like just more physical activity, getting away from my computer and sitting behind and working all the time and dealing with numbers and
Mhm.
seeing people as objects to fulfill a goal. But instead, more and more people started becoming like interesting in themselves. I think I'd been very goal
I
orientated on
see.
my external superficials for a long time. And so
I
then I
see.
started doing yoga as a kind of injury prevention training for my rock climbing, actually. And
Mhm.
I have to admit, like probably a part of it was that there was really hot women in yoga schools as well. That was also attractive to me.
Yeah.
Um, and that then drew me into, actually, I went on a very you know, crazy journey into all kinds of weird and wonderful Eastern practices, and I would say the occult. And today, like, I would call it demon
Mm.
worship. Actually, with all of these very new age, weird and wonderful ideas,
Mhm.
but which gave some very powerful experiences. But yeah, lacked still, I would say, like that higher perspective that I
Yeah.
found. Which I don't know. Have you encountered David Data on your path? This book, The Way of the Superior Man, because that also sounds
Yeah,
very
of
much,
course.
yeah,
Yeah, of course.
yeah,
Like some like quite some time ago, some 6, 7 years, probably.
yeah, yeah. Okay, then similar. So around the time you were also looking at Dave, or was this after Tony Robbins?
Who I think it was after Tony Robbins.
Yeah.
But back then, it didn't touch me that much. It wasn't like a giant breakthrough book for me. For me, what was more of a giant breakthrough book was the Robbins structure of the mind, like beliefs, values, identity, and how all these things are intertwined and how they create reality and how you change one and everything else changes.
Mhm.
This got me more attracted. This was more attractive for me back then. I think I might have to read the data book again because it was like I had this like swing into the like the feminine emotional feeling world and back into the like the dominant leadership masculinity stuff. So
Mhm.
I might find new things in it. But yeah, I don't have this particular like breakthrough moments with the book,
Mhm.
like a
Okay.
huge breakthroughs.
No. Okay.
But it's a great book, nevertheless.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's
Super
a super
important.
book. I don't lean on it actively, but I can see it's actually influenced my thinking in many ways. Still, actually, David Data and his work. Um, so could you try and summarize for me? You said like you experienced polarity, and you've summarized that as kind of like the dominant man in the lead and the radiant woman, I think was the word you used. So I
Yes.
can I understand like this is your kind of view of what the masculine, feminine, a kind of normative understanding of what they should be or what they can be when they are developed more fully, and and
Mhm.
and how can you put a bit more words and explanation of like what that means to be a dominant man and a radiant woman?
Yeah. Well, like I'm just careful about the word normative because because
I'm not at all. I think I'm very normative. I believe like I know what should be as well.
yeah,
But
that's what I'm saying. I mean, I spoke with people. I was the thing is like I don't know the experiences of other people who are saying that they have like a male identity or male existence in a female body. I did hear about instances where they swear for decades that this is their life experience and now they're happier. I also heard the experiences where it's the other way around that they change gender and then they come back. So I want to say this as a disclaimer that I'm not saying that this is some kind of dogma, right? What I'm saying is that this is what works for me and this is the kind of dynamics that I see in the relationships of men and women when being in the relationships. And if the dynamics is not working, it's most often not working because of the absence of polarity.
mm,
And dominant man, radiant woman, what the concept means that basically, or like the reason why I believe in this particular concept and why and how it works for me is that we as men are biologically wired to experience world a certain way because of the testosterone, because of the absence of monthly cycle. We have certain things in life that are easier to do for us than for women, and the other way around.
mm,
And in every relationship, there's influence of men and influence of men on of women on each other. And if there is no structure for how they influence each other and how the entire organism of relationship is navigating forward, there inevitably are going to be power conflicts. And those power conflicts will be when man wants to lead, which means that he wants to have the active influence on the relationship, and woman wants to have the same active relationship. They're going to be in clash. Mm-hmm. Or when woman is in her vulnerable and she's feeling, and the man is also in his vulnerable and she's feeling, there's no one to take charge and make decisions. Mm-hmm. So man is, I believe, biologically wired to be in a position of active influence, while a woman is biologically wired to be in the position of passive influence. So if active influence is leadership, I have a certain vision that I want to make a reality in my life, and my vision is including my woman. So it's a win-win for me and her. That this is how I'm influencing, and this is where I'm leading. I'm making the decisions, I'm setting the directions. Woman in her vulnerable means that she's the receiver of this. And when she's receiving of this leadership, her way of influencing the relationship is by sharing with the man a vulnerability, sharing with her emotions, her problems, her needs, her wishes, her desires. And she gives him an opportunity to lead more. And he gives basically her an opportunity to let go of control and to surrender and just feel and flow and be beautiful. So, and sometimes when a woman doesn't have enough trust in men that he's going to take care of her, or that he proved himself in the past, she doesn't want to go there. Like she doesn't want to go and share things vulnerably. She wants to have control. And if you look at what women are solving in women's circles and in online forums, women who want to work on themselves and want to be fulfilled in the relationships, like huge part of them are like the huge thing for them is to let go of control. How can I just let go of control and trust? Mm-hmm. And this dynamics, dominant man, radiant woman, is something that is taking care of this as well. And I mean, it has implications in many directions, because when man is in the position in the relationship where a woman is being in charge, so she's more leading, he's the vulnerable one, he's just basically doing things because she wants them to do, his self-perceived competency goes down. Mm-hmm. So it inevitably influences the way he's with other people, the way he shows up at work, the way he shows up with other people. And the same way, when she has to be in control in order for her to feel safe, she cannot really let go. And she cannot just be who she is and freely flow through the world and enjoy being beautiful without having to do anything at all.
Yeah. There's a movie called My Big Fat Greek Wedding, where the mother says to the daughter at some time, the daughter wants to go to do something, and she's all sad because like, oh, dad's the head of the home. And of course, like in Greek families traditionally, then like, you know, once he says something, that's just the law. And the wife then says to this daughter, like, well, yes, maybe your father is the head of the home, but the wife is the neck, and the neck decides where the head should turn. And then the wife, in her, you know, different ways, influences the way. And for me, that was actually a massive, a really wise thing that I think really summarize something what you're saying as well. When people hear passive influence from the woman, they think, well, that means no influence at all. But actually, I think the passive influence is far more effective a lot of the time than the active one as well. And it works all the time. It's just not as visible. So I think that's a very good point.
It's like
but Maros, I want to go back to something you started with as well, because I think it's interesting and relevant actually as well, because you have this brand dominant man, and it's all about being like a dominant man. And for me, that entails being strong and masculine and clear. And then you start off with by saying something like that, like, oh yeah, well, people can have the experience of being in a man and a woman's body and a woman's man's body, and this is just my experience, and I don't know anything about it, and you know, maybe there's other people have different experiences. And then afterwards, you said that like you believe that men are hardwired this way, and women are hardwired this way. I would tend to, I mean, obviously there's exceptions, you know, some women are very masculine, some men are very feminine, but I believe that, you know, we call things masculine and feminine because it's a reason why they connect them to male and female. So, I mean, for me, that is, you know, it's not a like a dogma as in a law, but it is like a general tendency in the human race. And I think a large part of the problems that we're facing today is because people are not looking at this and experiencing it and accepting it. And they're, you know, and we have the entire therapy industry that's profiting a lot from encouraging this kind of delusional thinking that, my own son actually was told in school every single week that the only gender that matters is the gender that he thinks he is, and that his biological gender is completely irrelevant. And he was even told this by his biology teacher at school as well. And for me, this is just indicative of like, like a
Yeah.
society that's going off the rails.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a great topic. It's a great and important topic. I would say that I was quite radical on this in terms of like, yeah, like you're a man. Like as long as you're producing testosterone, you are biologically wired to do certain things and to have certain qualities that women will never have. And the same way, because woman has a cycle and like different hormonal structure, she's wired and predetermined to have things that men will never.
Mhm.
But it's a strong judgment to make that it's determined by biology. And I do think like in 99% that it is true, but I do have this 1% that I believe everyone should determine their own truth by themselves. That's why I add after most of my posts only to trust what I'm saying as long as it makes sense to you. Because if someone believes what I say because I said it, for me, that's a failure, right? And recently I put a short post that says the idea that gender roles are a social construct is a social construct, which I'm not really invalidating the idea. I'm just saying that the idea itself basically collapses on its own premise.
Mhm.
And a guy responded to me on my private Facebook group that it's interesting to go to see in Indonesia, there's a tribe that had 5 genders and they've been around for I don't know how many hundreds or thousands of years. And I'm like, yeah, it's there. And my problem is that I don't really know what to do with it. Like it's not that I think it's true or untrue. I just really don't know what to do with it, how to make sense of like I'm almost afraid to make like 100% judgment that this is how
Mhm.
man is and this is how man should be
Yeah.
because he's in a male body.
I really respect that. And maybe so just like for anybody listening, before we started this conversation, actually Maros said to me like, oh, it might be interesting to hear about the Orthodox Christianity side of things. Because for me, part of the reason when I started this work, I was an atheist, progressive, liberal. And then I kind of went through like, Jordan Peterson phase and stuff like that. But more and more I realized like this problem that I'm trying to deal with is far larger than what I can deal with, that I can actually really honestly take on. And so I need something that's larger and bigger than myself that I can lean on and trust, and preferably something that I can trust completely. Because at the end of the day, like I realized like I was standing on shaky ground and I couldn't say anything definite about reality, about like, I needed to be able to ground my statements. If I wanted to be a dominant man, then I need to be able to understand reality better than other people around me so that I can be confident in sharing it with them. Because if I have a woman who just trusts me implicitly and surrenders to me and is vulnerable, I might misuse that. I might abuse my position. I might actually use it to just get my own needs met to her own detriment. And actually, like one of the statistics that I saw, Maros, that kind of frightened me a little bit or made me realize the responsibility that I have here is that if you look at men who get married, they will generally have much better health. They'll have fewer addictions. They'll live much longer. They earn more money, and they have much better careers. Look what happens to women who get married. They actually live shorter. So actually, in long-term married relationships, which is what I'm aiming for, it seems like that there's a natural tendency actually for women to do this, exactly what you're talking about, that it is natural for them to surrender themselves to the man. And then, unfortunately, I think as men, we often do manipulate or use and forget our responsibility to provide and protect and care for our women, and instead we use it for our own advantage as well. I'm not saying all men do this at all, but I think there is at least that tendency in myself. And I think for me, part of it, I have to admit, is I grew up watching pornography, and so I saw women as objects for me to get my needs met, my desires met, to get my kicks, or to get rid of my stress by ejaculating into her. And then now I can go on and carry on doing whatever I'm doing of manipulating other people around me, or whatever, pretending to be somebody that I'm not in my work situation so that I can get whatever it is I'm trying to get as well, right? So what I realized is like I need actually a very clear understanding of reality if I'm going to be try and step into becoming this dominant man. And society is definitely creating a much larger demand on me as well. So I needed like a higher truth to be able to say these things with certainty, because otherwise, as you said, like I don't really know. I don't really know. When people tell me like, it's like, well, I know that I'm a man, even though I'm born as a woman. How can I deny that? What do I use to reject that idea?
And did you find an answer to this question that you can make a judgment about whether it's true or not with certainty?
Yeah, so what I found the more I looked into this question is that knowledge always follows behind faith. So we put our faith in something, and then our knowledge can grow behind that. And if we put our faith in a bad thing, then it's not going to work very well, and our knowledge will stay very limited. If we put our knowledge in a good thing, or sorry, if we put our faith in a good thing, then our knowledge will grow very great. And if we put our faith in the most powerful and the best thing, that's when we can come to know the most. So
Mhm.
it all comes down to what do you put your faith into? And I think a lot of people are waking up to these days that, like, putting your faith in just the modern scientific community and what's coming out of popular science is increasingly becoming questionable. And so
Mhm.
people are looking, well, what is there something deeper and greater that we can put our faith into?
I
So
see.
that's exactly the path that I took. And for a long time, it was everything but Christianity. So looking at religious traditions, but everything that except for Christianity. And then slowly but surely in my life, I that shifted and I started looking at Christianity. And when I did that, then it became clear like that there was a branch of Christianity called the Orthodox faith, or the Orthodox Church,
Mhm.
which was by far the oldest and the most stable. And so far, I haven't found anything that in any way um, seems wrong. Yeah.
Yeah, I
Every
see.
day I get shocked by like, wow, okay, that was another insight
I
from
see.
that tradition that I've been
Mm.
able to receive. Yeah.
I see. Yeah, I agree that like I mean it's even like scientifically speaking, there's the confirmation bias, right? We're already looking for evidence. We're all the time looking for evidence of our already existing beliefs. So the best way to navigate this is to choose our beliefs and then create reality from that. And
And the problem with
if you have a belief
science is
system,
supposed to be value free, but we men live by values. We have to know what to aim at. We're teleological. We're aiming for a star. We're trying to get somewhere. But science, you can't put any values. It has to be value free. It's just based on observation. It's
mm,
describing what is, but science never tell you what ought to be. And for men to live an inspiring life, we have to be aiming towards something that inspires us. And science
yeah,
can't tell us what that should be, right?
yeah. Yeah, I mean, the reason why I was saying it is because I basically confirmed your argument that it starts with faith because like that's the comfort that's the idea that is constantly present for everyone that we always try to find out the evidence for our already existing beliefs.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
it's good to have like to choose your beliefs and to choose the way you
Yeah,
want to
and if
see
you don't
things.
actively choose them, you'll just swallow the mainstream cultural beliefs of your society that are around you that are fed to you every day through the news, through the newspapers, through
Yeah,
the stories that are coming out of Hollywood. And increasingly these stories are twisted and bent and like leading people astray, I would say actually like
yeah,
all the stories especially even from your perspective, like these stories are, you have just basically like, this like thin little girl who's like beating up 20 guys. And it's like, it's ridiculous. Everyone knows it's ridiculous. But like, so
mm,
I'm leading a group in my company in the Danish military in the Home Guard. And even today, like I can see the girls that come into the Home Guard, they're kick ass. They're top motivated because they've been told since they were 3 years old that they've got to be strong. They've got to be independent. They shouldn't take any shit from any guys. Whereas the men, they've just been like taught like toxic masculinity and like
yeah.
so it's like
And
it's
this is
working.
huge. This is huge in Denmark and in Scandinavian countries, right? Like more than in the rest of Europe.
I have a 3-year-old boy, right? And when he was born, people would buy us books about like, like female leaders and women leading from the front. That buy us books for him on these subjects. And he's a boy. And we've never got a book that
Mm.
like encourages him to become a man. It's just like the
Yeah.
male role models are just disappearing. And it's just like, so we're much further down the road in Western Europe compared to Eastern Europe, where are you still in Slovakia?
Yeah. No, yeah.
Yeah. So it's like we had a European men's gathering a couple of years ago where we had a number of guys from Eastern Europe, and they were just several of them just stood up and said, like, guys, we're shocked about how all of you just blame your own dads for everything. You have no respect for
Mm.
your own fathers because basically these guys, their whole lives, they've just been taught that, like, uh, the patriarch is the evil guy. And so as a result, like all these guys, we get guys to say like, hey, tell us something that you've struggled with your dad, and they'll just talk for hours. Then we'll say, well, tell us something that your mom could have done better.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of them just like they wouldn't be able to do it. Or no, sorry, yeah. What actually would awesome, tell us something good about your dad. And then what almost half of the guys would do is they would find a really bad thing their dad had done and then say like, well, he taught me to never do that. That was the best thing they could say about my dad is being like the negative example of things they should never do. Which
Yeah.
is like, oh, come on, like, everything you are, he was your role model of masculinity. And
Yeah.
even in my own life, I can see like how coming to Denmark, I went into this like rebellion against my own father.
Mhm.
Um, yeah.
It's interesting. And what do you think is the driving force for this, societally speaking? Because it happened to you. I mean, when I look at my life, it happened to me. We're living in a completely different countries in a different ages,
Mhm.
and if it's a cultural trend, I wonder if it's like a societally driven or if it's some kind of psychological thing where like a man. I think Data talks about this as well. That man, in order for him, like, he has to live as if his father was dead. And the way I understand it is, metaphorically speaking, I as a man have my own judgments. So my judgments about what's right or wrong, what's true or not, are
Mhm.
superior to those of my father.
Mhm.
And I think even there, in some mythology, I think there is this like act of like killing his father metaphorically in some way in order to reach the autonomy and sovereignty. I don't know much about this,
Mhm.
but I just wonder if it's societally driven or if it's just like an internal psychological process
Yeah. No, I think it's one
that
of the
plays.
most fundamental patterns of all mythology and all traditions. If you look back through kind of Greek mythology or Viking mythology, then you'll often find patricides, young men killing their fathers, or it happens with the gods as well. Um, uh, yeah, what's his? Yeah, I can't remember all the names of the Greek gods, but so this is a foundational pattern of like the rebellion against the father, that I think is core. And I think that it is like, it's based on a reaction that is natural to human beings, is that we rebel against authority and we want to do it our
Mm-hmm.
own way and we want to be the authority. And so it's better to criticize that which comes before us. And so for me, like an absolutely core element of becoming a dominant man is accepting that I'm not the top of the pyramid. There's other people who are above me, and I need to learn to respect and appreciate other men higher up than me, so that I can also then become, because it's if I shoot at them and I destroy them, often teaming up with women to undermine them, then
Mm.
the people down below me, what's going to protect me when they're going to come from my balls, right?
Yeah.
They're going to take me out. Um, so yeah, yeah, I think it is a foundational pattern. Jonathan Pajot gave a talk on this. I don't know if you know him. He's a talker on symbolism who drew out like the threads from a whole lot of different traditions at the European Men's Gathering, which really just surprised and it kind of showed this to be one of the most foundational patterns. Um,
Yeah. When I look back at my own experience, I would say that there were kind of like three stages. Like the first stage was when I was almost like blended with my dad in terms of values and beliefs.
mhm,
And this was probably I wasn't even aware of that. I was just living my life and I was like, I wasn't aware of my own experience almost.
yeah.
And then I
But
would
you saw your
say,
dad as like a hero, or like some you just looked up to him. Is that
yeah,
right? Yeah,
like authority, like he's
yeah,
the judge. Like
yeah.
like speaking about judgments, like making decisions and like discernment, like he's the judge. Like he
Mhm,
knows. And if I know something, but if I don't know, he's gonna know. And there came a point, I mean, we're all human beings, and like he wasn't perfect, I wasn't perfect, but there came a point where I realized like it just doesn't work anymore.
mhm,
And I started to notice how my judgments are actually different. But the idea that I'm different and I would judge things differently than what he does was really, really scary. And
mhm,
there was this massive internal split where I was like, well, then almost like, who am I? So like if I make my own judgment and if
mhm,
I make a judgment that's different than what he would do, I will have to take consequences. And I don't know if I'm ready for that.
Mm-hmm.
So there was like a period where I was kind of um, fighting with this and fighting my own way. And if I look back, I would totally say that this was the period when I was reading obsessively Tony Robbins and like going to the seminars and learning about myself.
Mm-hmm.
Because looking back, I would say that this was me trying to improve my ability to judge
Mm-hmm.
well
Mm-hmm.
and to make judgments and discernment that is going to lead me to great life.
Mm-hmm.
And then, in order for this to happen, to separate myself, I had a period where I was blaming him for everything,
Yeah.
like everything.
Yeah.
And I had so much anger, and there was hatred that I was surprised by. Like this, like what kind of person am I to have this kind of feelings towards my own father? But then I worked with it, I processed it. I spent days with a bamboo stick banging on the like, banging on the mattresses, like in tantra workshops. And eventually, when I got grounded in my own discernment and no judgment, I starting to see him as a human being again. It's like he was doing his best. He was just a different person. And I
Mm-hmm.
didn't know how to do any better. He didn't know how to do any better. So
Mm-hmm.
looking back, I think it was some kind of like normal cycle where I ended up like being a son and I love him and I respect him. Some things I would do so differently, but like that's probably the same cycle that I'm gonna go with my own son if I have one in the future.
Yeah, absolutely. Great, Maros. Yeah, and I think that's the pattern that we all need to go through, and I've done the exact same thing as well.
Mm.
Yeah, even in some ways, maybe it was good for me to have that Danish psychologist who was telling me my dad was an evil tyrant, so that I could get through all of the deep down stuff that might have been there.
Maybe he
Because
was
I,
stuck
I
in the second stage and he was projecting it all on you.
yeah, who knows? Yeah, so I think so, something like that. Yeah, yeah, and it just seems to be like the mainstreams. I think we're caught up in this like teenage rebellion increasingly. I think like when you talk about like what's the societal thing, part of it is just like, with some people believe like, oh, as a society we're all like kind of like progressing into like a new age of like, enlightenment or something like that. I'm more like, we're hardly getting past the teenage years now. People, I know like 40, 50-year-old guys who are still dealing with things that, they should have got past when they're 15. So I think part of it is just like a lack of maturity, that we're being coddled and protected so much. We don't have to do hard things. Even in people in university now are like being shielded from having things that might upset them or something like that. And I don't think it's
Mm.
helpful for anybody
Trigger
to be
warnings,
protected that, yeah,
like
trigger
on
warnings and
Facebook. Yeah.
all that kind of stuff. Yeah. I think that yeah, I appreciate that you're willing to come on and have a good direct conversation with me as well. And we could even talk about transgenderism and who knows if I'm going to get banned from YouTube one day or something like that. Hopefully not.
Yeah,
Um,
I think we left it as a like this was the one thing that's been puzzling me because we left kind of like an open loop in like not really having a specific answers. And I mean, I just guess that like my conclusion is that I really don't have the answer. Like I really don't know how it is. I'm not
No, and
saying
I've concluded
there's
like
certainly
it's
a
not worthwhile talking about it unless it's really personally close to you. So if you
yeah.
get a client, obviously you need to be able to talk with them about it, but it might not be your area of speciality that you can help them with. But I really think like what I noticed is I'd be organizing these big events for guys, and I'd have someone writing to me saying like, "Hey, I'm in transition," or "I haven't had my bottom surgery yet, but I'm still," or something like that. But I'm on the way to becoming a man, and can I come? And my ass is just like
Mm.
we're organizing an event for men. If you need to ask if you can come, because you're not sure if you're a man or not, then like don't come. It's like this is an event for
Mm.
men. We don't want to because it's endless. In the beginning, we had some of these people coming to our events that wanted to have these conversations, and the
Yeah,
conversations never end. They just never end. And
I
for me,
see.
it's become very clear that what's happening is that these people feel a deep sense of insecurity. And so they just go around and they're constantly trying to get confirmation from other people that they've made the right decision. And I
I
get that,
see.
why they have it like that way. But for me, I just realized like, I don't want to have to spend my time having these conversations. I want to work with
I
men
see.
who are men.
That makes
That's what I
sense.
want to do. I'm very happy there are people who are very compassionate and caring and are working with these people who have gender dysphoria. It's
Mhm.
exploding in the West right now. It's very clearly a social contagion. It's something that's coming through social media that young girls, especially, are being encouraged to do it and are shifting in this way massively, taking all kinds of stuff. But I also noticed that this has been dying a little bit away again when kind of like conflict and war is is happening on the borders of Europe and coming closer. It seems
Mhm.
like that, there's this, I don't know if you've seen this graphic, this meme about like, hard times create strong
Yeah,
men create good times, et cetera, et cetera. I
yeah,
think we're a little bit going through that cycle to a certain extent as
yeah.
well. I'm just worried about the strong men are becoming strong men in the dominant sense that aren't always aware of their responsibility. And for me, this thing of like, you know, I would say more leadership than dominance and responsibility needs to be tied together. And just focusing on one
Absolutely.
or the other, just it can, there's a big risk of it going wrong way, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, when you're leading and you're not taking responsibility, you're controlling because you're doing it for yourself. So that's like the dominance, I would say, is like the whole leadership. There's a great book, Dichotomy of Leadership, where the art of it, you can say the feminine aspect of it, is that it's a perfect balance between dichotomies. Direct yet caring, right? Containing yet enabling, strict yet nurturing. And there's so many of these. And the dominance, I use the word dominance because it's kind of triggering people. And like when I say like dominant man and I say something good, everyone goes like, no, dominant is bad. Like, you shouldn't be dominant. But I mean, if you're leader and you need to get shit done and you need to do the right thing, even though it's uncomfortable for you or someone else, you have to be penetrative. And penetration, like dominance is leadership with penetration. So, and whether like, and then the moral judgment behind it, is this good? Is this not good? Is it caring? Is it not caring? That perfect, like inside every person, it reflects their own relationship with masculinity, their own relationship with their own self-worth, with their own value. It's kind of fun to observe the reactions sometimes.
Yeah.
And yeah, yeah. So,
I absolutely sensed that you managed to poke a reaction out of me, and when I engaged, then I could really feel that there was a reflectiveness there. So I think Maros,
mm.
you're on a good path. It seems like you're really thinking about what you're doing, and so yeah, it's been a good pleasure. So yeah,
Oh,
I'll
I
just give
appreciate that.
you last minutes here to say where you people can find you if they're interested in looking more at what you're doing, or anything that's on your radar at the moment, and then or anything you want to
Mm.
add in a lot at the end of the conversation that you feel you didn't say, then go for it.
Okay, well, guys can connect with me, or whoever wants to connect with me can do that on Facebook on my name. I guess it's Maros Cincura. It's probably better to put it in thumbnails or something because it's difficult to
Yeah,
it's
that'll
not
be on the
easy
title of
to
the video.
pronounce.
Yeah.
Yeah, and my website is bymaros.com. I have few ultimate guides, which are topics that I went deep into. Like there's value in there. Guys can make sense out of some of the questions that they're having. And that's it, more or less. I have a Facebook group, Masculine Confidence Growth Strategies, where I'm posting every day. And sometimes there are nice discussions under the posts on various topics from mental health to masculinity to leadership and so on. So this is probably the best way to connect.
Okay. Maros, thanks. It's been a great pleasure talking to you. I appreciate your time and energy. And yeah, I hope we'll have occasion to be more in touch in the future again.
Thank you, Paul. Thank you for inviting me. I enjoyed this conversation and hope to talk
So,
to you soon.
great.